So my name is Felipe and I am paddling around the UK and Ireland this year. I started in London, down the Thames. First day I paddled through London, and after going through London I went down the south coast of England, paddled through Dover, Hastings, the Isle of Wight, and then down through Cornwall, up towards the Bristol Channel, then around Wales, up through Liverpool. Then I crossed to Ireland via the Isle of Man. Okay. Went around clockwise around Ireland, so did the southern coast of Ireland, the west coast of Ireland with all the Atlantic swells. Then hopped back to Scotland through Belfast. Went around Scotland, paddled by the west coast of the Isle of Skye, over the top of Scotland, and now going down the east coast of the UK, back to London, and I've arrived here in Dunbar. The west coast of Ireland is the big swell country. You get all of the swells from the Atlantic, so all of the storms that brew up in the Atlantic, when they send the waves towards Europe, the first piece of land they encounter is the west coast of Ireland. And you can get massive waves crashing on the shore, sometimes 3 meter, 4 meter waves. It can be quite a challenging place to be paddling a kayak. So on one of the points there, I was paddling around a place called Sline Head, just north of the Aran Islands. And I arrived at the base of the headland and saw that the swell was too big to cut through the small islands that separate the lighthouse from the mainland. And so then I had to go about 3 miles out into the ocean to make it around the headland. And getting that much distance away from the coastline, the swells build up quite considerably, and I was paddling through 3 meter swells there to make it around the headland as the waves were breaking on the rocks near the lighthouse. It was quite a scary experience there, about the limit of my abilities for what I feel comfortable doing on my own. So what inspired me to come and paddle around the UK and Ireland? Well, I've done a few other trips before. The most recent trip I had done was to paddle around Vancouver Island in Canada, and it was a trip where I felt that I tested my ability, that I could move on to the next challenge after completing that. And so I thought, well, okay, well, the UK is a place that is it's got some dramatic coastline, and it's equally it's a bit more challenging. And so then that was one of the reasons why I decided to come to the UK. The other reason was because the kayak I paddled in is called the Rockpool Terran. And it's a British kayak, which meant that if I were to paddle around the UK and Ireland, I wouldn't have to bring my kayak here. I could just buy the exact same one here in the UK and then sell it off at the end of the trip. So logistically, that made it a lot simpler. And the third reason was because there's a lot of paddlers here in the UK and Ireland. There's a big paddling community, and I knew I would meet lots of different paddlers and interesting folks along the way.
And you mentioned that paddling community. Tell me about some of the people you've met on this journey.
Yes, I met a lot of different paddlers. In Cornwall, I met a gentleman there that has also paddled around Ireland, and he gave me some pointers there for the places there that I could go, things to keep an eye out on. In Ireland, I met several other folks who've paddled around Ireland. I've also met another gentleman there by the name of John Hines, who had paddled around Ireland some 10 years ago, so he was also very knowledgeable about the coastline, since he lives in the area. Here in the UK, in Scotland, I also met a few paddlers along the way who showed me where the interesting parts were. One of the things that you don't realize is that when you're paddling on your own and you don't know the place, you sometimes tend to skip a lot of the hidden gems of the coastline. So when you have somebody that has intimate local knowledge of the stretch of coastline you're paddling in, you can find things like sea stacks and caves that you would normally not be expecting to look out for on your own. Most beautiful place I've seen so far in the journey? Well, there's been a lot of interesting places I've seen. I really like the coast of Cornwall, especially with all of the cliffs and the caves, some very dramatic scenery. I really like the west coast of Skye, as you have also lots of dramatic cliffs and sea stacks. Up in the north of Scotland as well, going around Cape Wrath and the Pentland Firth, you see all of the tidal races and the islands there through the Hebrides. There's a lot of varied and interesting terrain that you can paddle through in the UK. You're never bored paddling here.
Well, good. So, yeah, how's the journey been?
Yeah, so thus far I've paddled almost 3,000 miles since I left London back in March 11th. And I have a little under 500 miles left to go before I make it back to London. And I thought that paddling along the North Sea was going to be the easy part since it's sheltered from the swells of the Atlantic Ocean, but I've been surprised with how much wind we get in this section of the coastline. In fact, coming down from John O'Groats to here in Dunbar, it's been one of the slowest parts of the trip in terms of just having to paddle into the wind for several days and having to do tens of miles a day, pushing, fighting for every mile that you're going through.
And yesterday, we met. You and I met just outside the harbour wall as you were entering Dunbar. How far had you travelled yesterday?
Yesterday, I covered 51 miles. So when the wind dies down, you have to squeeze as much effort as you can when the situation allows it. So yesterday, the headwind died down a bit. It was only about 10 miles per hour. And so I left before sunrise. I was putting the boat on the water, leaving from Montrose, and I paddled down to Dunbar, and I arrived here close to sunset. So that was, in terms of time, that was the longest day I paddled. I paddled almost 14 hours to cover the 51 miles.
But not your longest paddle, you said?
Not my longest paddle in terms of distance. My longest paddled was in the Isle of Skye, crossing back to the continent. There I managed 59.5 miles. So I document my trips as I'm doing them. I have a Facebook page called Around on My Kayak, where I tend to post almost every day what happened during that particular day as I was paddling. So I'll post photographs and I'll give a brief summary of what happened on that day. After the trip is completed, I'll develop the actual logs more. So I'll put in greater thought on telling the story of how things unfolded. And in fact, I have a book coming out hopefully at the end of this year about my previous trip of paddling around Vancouver Island in Canada.
And what would be the standout moment from that trip for you?
The standout moment from that trip. So Vancouver Island in Canada is a bit different from the UK in that it's a lot more isolated. So whereas here in the UK, you can pretty much be certain that every 2 or 3 days you'll come into a town. In Vancouver Island, that's not the case. In Vancouver Island, you might go 2 weeks before you find a settlement, especially on the Pacific coast of the island. So one of the interesting things there is that you're a lot closer to nature when you're paddling through there. And in fact, I saw some quite varied wildlife when I was there, including a bear when I was hiking up to a lighthouse to get a view of the place where I was going to paddle. It was called Cape Scott at the very end of the island. I was paddling up the trail. I was walking up the trail, and I came face to face with a bear on the trail. It was quite a scary moment for a little bit because I think the bear wasn't expecting me to be on the trail. We came around the corner and we ran into each other. And so then as I started walking back, the bear kept coming forward until eventually I stopped because there was a fallen log behind me. And then the bear realized that I wasn't going to be moving backwards anymore, so he walked around the bush, went around me, back in the trail, and then kept going. He didn't really think much of me, except that I was in his way. On my website, I sell branded merchandise with my logo. So there's beanies, hats, shirts, dry bags, all kinds of things there that you can imagine that are there for sale. One of the things I'm doing on this trip is helping a charity called St. Mungo's that helps the homeless and the immigrants in the south of England. And after talking with them, one of the things that we decided to do for this trip was we would have a little gimmick to incentivize people to donate. So everybody who donates and sponsors a mile of my trip, I get to name a geographic feature of the coast after them. And then when I eventually write the book and make little maps, I will use their name instead of the original name for the geographic feature. So that's one thing. And then also, as I go along, as I paddle around the coast, if somebody helps me along the way, so if they buy me a meal, or if they help me carry the kayak off the beach, or if they gave me a place to stay for the night, I will give them a beanie with my logo, and I will also donate $5 to St. Mungo's for everybody that helps me along.
Helping others as they help.
Yeah.
You help them as they help others.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a win-win-win situation. So I get some help from folks, because sometimes carrying the kayak off the beach can be quite difficult. So I will get some help. The person who helped me gets a beanie for their effort, and the charity gets $5 every time somebody helps me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Felipe, for chatting to me today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Companies that you want to say a specific thank you to. I noticed your specs, and I was on your website earlier.
Yes, indeed. In fact, for this trip was the first time I actually got some sponsorship to be able to do the trip. So the sponsors I have are these glasses that I wear. These goggles are a company called Safe Vision. They actually make industrial goggles, but I found out through my job that they work very well for kayaking, and they stay on your head even when you roll the boat. The other company that is sponsoring me is a Chinese paddle company called ZJ Paddles. They make fantastic wing paddles, and I'm using those paddles on this trip. I also have another company called IMG that sells travel insurance. That I bought my insurance for this trip in case something happens, so I'm not mooching off the NHS. Sponges called Swoosh. They gave me 30 sponges to give away to folks along the way, and these sponges, I keep them in the hatches of my kayak, because if a little water gets in, so the sponge will soak up the water and it won't get things wet. And also another company that is sponsoring me is the sail on my kayak called Falcon Sails, so they're sponsoring me. And the company that makes roof racks for you to put your kayak on the roof, spongy roofs. The company is called Me Rack, and I used their rack to go pick up my kayak from the factory. In fact, my kayak is built by Rockpool in Anglesey, in a town called Holyhead, and I arrived in London. So when I arrived, the first thing I had to do was to go pick up the kayak. So I rented a car, drove to Anglesey, got the kayak, put the kayak on the roof with the Me rack, and then drove it back down to London, while at the same time praying that it was going to stay there and I wasn't going to run into any problems with driving an 18-foot kayak on the highway that was longer than my car.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Felipe. Is there anything you want to add before we close up here?
I think I'm good.
Good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Felipe, for that.